Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it. So this is actually my second time doing this. Actually, I'll get started and then I'll explain all that. So thank you for having me out. Do we have anybody here that's using the CDK currently? Good, I won't get in trouble if I say something wrong. Do we have anybody here using like CloudFormation, Terraform, GoForm? I know you're using GoFormation. What's that? You're special. So just typical quick agenda that every presentation has to have. A little bit about me, why I'm doing this. We'll kind of get into infrastructure management over the years. Talk about the CDK, and then I'll do a quick demo of the CDK. So basically creating a project, and I'll probably launch a project as well. So and then summary and questions. Please feel free to ask questions while I'm presenting. I'm not opposed to that. You know, that's the best time to ask it while I'm right in the middle of it. So don't hesitate to interrupt me, please. So who am I? I'm a cyber systems engineer at Northrop Grumman. I've been at Northrop Grumman for about the last 2.5 years. I went to Penn State. I got a master's in systems engineering from George Washington. Been doing the government consulting thing in a variety of worlds: systems engineering, systems administration, DevOps, and automation for about the last 13 years. So currently, most of the work I'm doing right now is in obviously systems or DevOps type work in the in cybersecurity for my customers. I'm married, have 3 mostly wonderful kids. They have their moments. For those of you who are parents, you probably get it. Love cars, Formula One. I'm a Freemason and personal Uber to my children, especially in the summer with everything they have going on. So this talk came about. So I've been using CloudFormation for about the last 2 years, and I am not traditionally a software developer. I come from the infrastructure world, from the systems administration, the operations side of the world, and I saw this great article on Hacker Noon back in November, I think. Actually, it was very shortly after. It was shortly after AWS released the CDK, and it just kind of talked about how do you find the time to learn a new skill as a working professional, right? We go to work for 8, 9, 10 hours a day, depending on how things are going, and then you come home and you want to veg. So to me it was a really great, really impactful article that I read, and I had recognized that technology was changing. Software and development is taking over the world. Thanks to stuff like DevOps and infrastructure as a code, thanks to CloudFormation and stuff like Terraform. And it just, I'd seen the news of the Cloud Development Kit going into beta, and it seemed perfect for me because I'm an infrastructure guy. I understand infrastructure. I'd like to think I do. I understand CloudFormation, so it made sense that I can teach myself hopefully how to code and use this to do it. So that's where we are. And also, the second reason is I wanted to do a little bit more public speaking. I've never really been a public speaker. This is the second time I've done this. So here I am. Thank you for having me again, guys. Yeah, so infrastructure management for all the infrastructure people out here. It starts kind of off in the manual world. In AWS, if you're a smaller organization, when I started using AWS, we use the AWS console. So you go and you pick around in the UI on the web and spin up all your stuff. From there, you kind of ramp up. You start scripting some of your stuff using. At least that was the way I did. I started using user data to bootstrap my instances I was spinning up. But even before that, working as a Linux administrator, using stuff like Kickstart, and then Puppet, Chef, whatever to to finish up the configuration management side of it. We realize that stuff's still over there, and Puppet can probably cross over some of this, at least like maybe provisioning engines for Chef and Ansible if you're using Tower. But shell scripts, lots of shell scripts, but it's not easily replicated, right? We're technology people. How many of us do a good job at keeping up with documentation? I know I don't. I have to be forced to do it most of the time. So you get to that document hell of, not everything's documented. So what happens when you have this system that you've designed from the beginning and you leave and somebody has to take it over? So yeah, sure, you walk somebody through it and try and get them as far as you can, but most of the documentation's still not there. So after you've gone, something goes wrong. Actually, a situation I'm kind of going through right now. Not all the notes are there, right? So kind of the next step in that is the provisioning engines. So when I'm talking provisioning engines, I'm talking like CloudFormation, Terraform type stuff. So the desired state model of what do I want my infrastructure to be. It handles the back-end logic of you. You write your CloudFormation or your Terraform. Tell it what you want to build for it, and have it go. It's a little bit more shareable. I think we're just talking about it up here. Sharing our CloudFormation scripts, and when you need to do something, you go through your organization's GitHub. Go through your organization's GitHub and find what you need to get done what you're going to do. But the problem I always had was that still required a lot of time in reconfiguring reconfiguring it to work for what I was going to do. And as your infrastructure gets more complicated, your CloudFormation or your Terraform scripts get longer and longer. So we go on to kind of the document object model, and I really put that there because that's what everybody calls it that I've seen. So we're starting into the code base side of it, right? So using Python, Go, Ruby to define your code. Products like Troposphere, Sparkle Formation, and Go Formation. They support actual code libraries. Still a little bit of a lack of abstraction to it, and again, they still get a little bit longer. Your templates can get very long depending on what you're trying to do. This brings us into the Cloud Development Kit. So an open source framework that was developed by Amazon, so of course it'll only work within AWS, but that defines infrastructure as code, as actual code, and then uses CloudFormation on the back end to provision your resources. So as support is added, it integrates fully with Amazon resources. So EC2, ECS, S3, you name it. As long as they've built in that support, it's there for you, and it's all defined. It's currently in developer preview, so the current version is 0.35, which is as of like 2 days ago. So basically, it builds on the DOM-based tools by providing an abstraction layer that wasn't there before, and actually provides on both and CloudFormation or Terraform by lessening the amount of code that you need to write. And I'll show you an example of that here very shortly. Sorry, can everybody see that picture okay? So the hierarchy to the CDK. At the top level, you have an app. So your infrastructure is designed as an app. And then an app can be made up of one or more stacks. And the stacks are the deployable unit of your CDK application. And then you have your constructs, which are is a representation of a AWS resource. So your construct, if you develop a Drupal or WordPress site, so your constructs would be made up of EC2 instances, RDS instances, load balancers. What else would you put in there? CloudFront distribution, whatever you would put into making your site, that then becomes a construct. You can actually break that up into stacks too. So if when you run it for like your RDS stuff, which isn't going to change as often as your application layer, you may want to make that its own separate stack. So it's it will update only when you make those changes. Everything is going to update based on the changes you make, but that will be another way to think of it. So it's just a visual representation of that, right? Application stacks, and then your stacks are made up of the constructs. So a way to think of the constructs is they're the individual cloud components. And current supported languages are TypeScript, JavaScript, C#, and Python. I believe Ruby support will be one of the next ones to come up, but there's a lot of support for basically all the big languages out there that people are using. So it for most people it'll go right hand in hand with what you're developing on. So if you're a JavaScript shop, use JavaScript and it just fits right in with your application code. Features. So I already touched on it. The languages that are currently supported. Java as well. Sorry, Java and JavaScript. Supports popular package management tools. So npm, PyPy. Put your stuff in GitHub. All of that to make sharing your stuff easier. If anybody's seen the talk from reInvent this past year, that's basically how they did a lot of it. They started out with a base CDK application, and then they actually pulled in a module that they had developed, put it on npm, and pulled it right into the application that they were showing off. Close collaboration with the AWS security teams and the solution architects. I left the solution architects out. Hopefully there are new solution architects here. If there are, I apologize for leaving you off of this. But the CDK team worked closely with those groups. So when you build something with the CDK, it follows AWS security and well-architected best practices. It's all kind of built in from the start. So kind of comparing CloudFormation and the CDK, just some concepts, and this is kind of a evolving one. In CloudFormation would use stack sets if we're deploying across multiple accounts, organizations, etc. Within the CDK, you actually define that within your application. So within the application, you would create a stack for each account. So if you're deploying something to US East 1, US West 2, US East 2, across those three, you define those as separate stacks. And then when you run your CDK deploy command, you can tell it which stack you want to deploy or which stack you want to update. So it's similar in concept to how stack sets work in CloudFormation, but a little different. In CloudFormation, we have testing tools like CFN-Lint, CFN-Nag, and TaskCat. The testing within the CDK is still a bit new. It's something that people are playing with. If you go to the CDK Slack channel or the Gitter channel, you'll hear people are talking about it, and it's stuff that newer stuff that people have been doing, but they're basically using the native tools of the programming language they're doing. Something I left off here is just like CloudFormation, you can use your common deployment methodology. So if you're a Jenkins shop, you can run deployments through Jenkins, and you can certainly use the AWS code tool. So you can use code build. You can run it as a pipeline and code pipeline and deploy everything like that. So the support's there, and it's a little bit custom. You have to use some Lambda to make it happen, like in a code pipeline. But it's one of those things they're developing it, and I've heard that it may be going GA soon. That didn't show up well. I apologize. So comparing templates. I mentioned earlier that in CloudFormation, depending on the complexity of what you're trying to deploy, your templates are going to get very long. So on the left is a CloudFormation template that deploys a Fargate application. It is 627 lines long. I can define the same application in the CDK with 37 lines. So yeah, I've reduced the amount of work I'm doing writing code by quite a bit. So the big thing is, the big loss is, when I write it in CloudFormation, I have to write all my IAM policies, all that stuff that I have to write to make sure all the accesses are there, that all the services are properly communicating. I have to create my load balancers, everything that's communicating over the load balancers, define the ports and protocols I want to use over it. Whereas that's all built into the CDK. So when I build the CDK application, I basically import the modules I want to use. So in the case of this one, I get EC2, I get ECS, and the ECS Patterns modules. And everything in there is defined. So when I say I want to build a load balancer, it uses AWS best practices for ECS and builds the load balancer for me. So everything's there, and I don't have to define that. So it's taking a lot of that away from you, abstracting it away from you, and AWS has essentially done that for you within those modules. So yeah, 37 lines, and then you can synthesize it, and it spits out the CloudFormation for you, and we'll deploy it. So let's move on to that. Can you see that command line very well, or should I maybe do this? Sorry about that, guys. Make that roll. Where's that set? Sorry guys, bear with me here.
You're looking for transparency?
Yeah.
It was in the menu when you were...
It was the third one down,
Yeah.
the top.
Was
Is it
that
still here right now? No, at the very top, right?
Yeah, it was when he was mousing up at the top.
Yeah, the top menus.
Oh, was it one of the top menus over
Yeah,
here?
the very menus at the, no, at the top.
At
Top of the
very
screen.
top. We can't see it.
Oh, I got you. Oh, okay.
Auto hide.
The third one down right there.
There we go.
Command U.
There we go. Sorry, I just switched back to Windows recently. All right, let me do this. All right, so let me show you this first. So first thing I'll do is let's just make a...
Can you make it a little bigger?
Yeah, sorry. Is that better?
You need to
Text to
Command plus.
Yeah, Command Plus.
All right, so basically just create a test directory. So the first thing you're doing when you're creating an application is you want to initiate it, right? So command is CDK init. Give it the...
I was going to say, can you increase the font a little bit for us?
Oh yeah.
There's some folks in the back that might.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, just.
You just press Command
Hold on.
Plus.
Yeah.
There you
There we
go.
go. Is that better?
Keep going.
A little bit.
How's that?
You're going, just keep
Keep
going.
going.
So now, doctor's office eye check.
More.
Say stop when you're ready.
Better or worse?
Whoa.
One.
Did we lose one?
You guys see that?
Clear. I'm almost up the screen. Tucking.
Yeah, let me go one down, because then I think we get the...
No, we don't get your command.
Yeah.
Can you see the...
That was
No,
nice.
it's not at the bottom.
I think that's just the
There you go.
television
There
set.
All right, so CDK init -L for language. You could do -- language if you wanted to write it out full. So in this case, JavaScript. And it's gonna build everything for me. It's gonna build a skeleton framework of an application.
You just install the CDK with NPM?
Yeah. So it's just use npm to install it. I think it supports. I think you have to have like Node 1610. I can't even remember what the versions are, but everything's on there. You go to AWS. I think I have it at the end of this. I have this site, but it'll tell you everything you need to have on it. All right. So yeah, basically pops all that in there. So the first thing I can do to make sure that it worked properly is I can run the CDK Synth, and that's going to spit out, So I have an empty application. Spits out the, CloudFormation YAML at the end of it. And basically all it has in it right now is the metadata for the project. Basically tells me what version of the CDK I'm using. Node 10. Node 10, I think. And that's about it, because I haven't done anything else.
What was the synth command for again? I forgot. Sorry.
So that synthesizes your CloudFormation.
Oh, well.
So if you want to see the CloudFormation, you run the synth command, and it'll spit that out for you. If you're using a language like Java or TypeScript, you have to run npm run build to build it. And actually, you can do, if you're using Java or TypeScript, you can run npm watch, so you can, as you're working on it, it'll keep compiling the code for you. It'll spit out if you're having any errors or anything like that. But it's compatible with all of that. So, all right. All right. So here is my service. Let me do this real quick. That's not what I wanted you to do. You guys see that okay, or?
That's good.
Okay. So here's my project in Atom. So, the project on the right side. The important stuff within the CDK is going to be your bin directory. So this is my actual application. So here's my application. Here's everything goes into it, and this is what's launching the application. And then in lib is where I write my stacks and my constructs. So I'm going to launch like I said, I'm going to run a demo on a Fargate service. So up at the top here are where I would essentially do my imports. So I have CDK, EC2, ECS, and ECF Patterns. So here I am creating a construct that is creating my VPC, and I'm telling it to use 3 availability zones. Below that, I'm creating my ECS cluster. So here's another construct, and it's using the VP. It's pulling in the VPC. VPC construct that I created above. And then the last thing I'm doing is creating load balanced Fargate service as another construct, right? So I'm telling it I want a cluster, 512 for my CPU count, 6 application servers. Use Amazon ECS sample as my container image, 2 gigs of RAM, and a public load balancer. So that's really all there is to this application I'm creating. Again, you can go as simple or as complex as you want. Applications can have multiple stacks. Stacks can be made up of multiple constructs, or an application can be made of one stack, one construct, whatever you want. If you go to their, they have several demos that you can run through to learn about this. One of them's making a simple S3 bucket. So you can do whatever you want.
Does that have security groups and ingress egress?
What's that? Yeah, it's gonna create all that. So the way that AWS did it is within, when you pull in AWS CDK, AWS ECS, like a lot of that, or EC2, a lot of that, the best practices for egress and ingress are built in. But you can also define it. I haven't gotten to making, creating a load balancer as a construct. But yeah, like if you go to the, they have a library of all the constructs. It'll tell you what this stuff. So like for the Fargate service here, only 2 of these are required. I think, yeah, I marked it down. Cluster and image. So those are the only 2 required things I need to define into to make a Fargate service. I could have left the rest out if I wanted to. If you use, I don't have Atom set up to do it, but if you use VS Code, and I think it's only TypeScript for now, it has auto-completion for the CDK, so as you type it, it'll actually show you everything. And it's got all the annotations from the construct library. So like if I start writing cluster and I'm in VS Code, it'll auto-complete it, and it'll have the little question mark that you can hover over, and it'll give you all the information on cluster. And it'll even tell you that it's a required item. All right. So, let's go back here. All right. So I can run the CDK Synth on this again, and it should hopefully spit out all the. So there's all the CloudFormation that would make this app, right? So here's my load balancers. This is a web load balancer. This one's only on port 80. That's not good security practice. Just a demo. I'm going to delete it shortly. You guys all see that okay? I can just keep going up and up and up. But yeah, it's 600 and some lines. So here's defining all the Fargate stuff. So let's deploy it. So the command is CDK deploy. So it's basically, now it's going to it's going to re-synthesize all the CloudFormation. And here's what it's going to do. So I get all the changes. It's going to tell me what it's going to make. So this, from the security standpoint, it's going to tell me what it's going to do IAM-wise. So these are all the IAM permissions, all my security group rules it's creating. So it won't start building it until I hit yes and deploy it. So this is one of the nice things that I like about it, and actually I'd love to see the CloudFormation guys put this into the CLI for CloudFormation, is you get this readout that stops, well, in CloudFormation you have to define all of your IAM stuff, right? So you wouldn't see this necessarily. But when I hit yes here, I'm going to get the CloudFormation events log all popping up in the command line. So usually it has to pop back over to the web UI to see everything happening. It's going to happen here in the command line for me. I'm probably picking hairs here.
If you want to configure your inbound security groups for, like, say, connect to an RDS instance on Postgres or something like that, you can do all that in CDK?
Yeah, you just have to, like I said, you go to the construct library and figure out what the proper construct is, and configure, or the option under that construct, and you just tell it, and it'll put it in there.
Cool. So while this is running, there's a lot of...
Yeah, so here we go. So you can see it's... So what it does is it's creating a CloudFormation change set and then starting to deploy all this. So you see, this is all the stuff you'd see in the, in AWS in the web UI. You now kind of get it here. Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, have you found any services that CDK doesn't really cover yet?
organizations, but CloudFormation doesn't support organizations either. You have to use custom resources for organizations. No, I mean, the main stuff, the big stuff I've used, I've always been heavy in EC2, RDS, and stuff like that. It's all in there. Custom resources when I've built up new AWS accounts through organizations. You have to use custom resources in CloudFormation. So this has custom resources. Lambda's in here, SQS, SNS. I think even some of the elemental stuff is already showing up. So I think if it's already in CloudFormation, most of it's in there. At least if it's been in there a long time. Like some of the newer stuff, I don't know how some of the newer stuff is. I imagine it's not, but there's a lot of stuff in there. I've just scratched the surface with playing around with it. So.
I googled EKS and Elasticsearch, and they're both in there already.
Yeah.
I was surprised.
Yeah.
So when you, sorry, this might be a more simple question, but for defining a security group for an EC2 instance,
Yep.
And you said it uses all the best practices, will it default to just being open to everything, or will it default to your current IP address in the security
That's a good
group?
question. I don't know. I imagine it wouldn't default to port 22 to the world. But yeah, so if you build an EC2 instance, you can either just define your EC2 instance, and the CDK will handle building the security groups for you, or what you could do is you would create a construct of security groups, and then you would tell your EC2 instances or auto-scaling groups, or whatever you're spinning up, you would then reference that security group construct to have your auto-scaling group use that security group, right?
Yeah.
You could do it either way. I don't know how they defined it. I would hope that, there is an article out there that they did consult the security folks, so I would hope that port 22 isn't open to the world. But I'll have to look into that. That's a good question. Anything else on this?
So my company really is at your manual scripted stage with
Okay.
AWS.
So CloudFormation, Terraform, what are you guys using?
I pay people to know that.
You pay people. That's a good answer. That's a great answer, actually.
How
How much do you pay them?
how would I know that we need to move to provisioning or the document object model or this?
I would say if you're not doing one of the three, you would probably want to consider it. The great thing, CloudFormation, Terraform, one of the DOM-based tools, they're all great, right? I mean, what I will say is AWS says this is not production ready, so I will say don't use this for production.
Right.
But if you have people that know CloudFormation and know it well, and can then build that into pipelines and automate all that, it's just freeing up your folks' time for improving your applications and making things better, right? So yeah, I would say if they're not using one of these tools already, definitely look into making that switch.
So I actually have a comment for that. How scared are your engineers of doing disaster recovery testing?
Yeah.
Because if they're afraid to tear down their environments because it takes a while to get them back up, that means they're not actually doing any sort of templated language with this stuff.
Yeah, if you have
Stuff's
everything,
not static.
at a minimum, CloudFormation, let's say for some reason, let's say US East goes down, and that's where you have everything. But if you have everything in CloudFormation, and if you've backed up your data, let's say you're just running a Drupal website, so you have CloudFormation for your EC2 instances for the application, and your RDS stuff for your database backend. If you have a good database backup strategy, and you have everything backed up, snapshotted, and it's stored, and you can get to it, and you have CloudFormation, you could be up, within an hour if something were to happen. You go over to US East 2 and you could be back up within an hour, if not faster than that. But yeah, That's a fantastic. That's a fantastic. I mean, just well-architected framework, security pillar, like that's what they hammer on, is having, being able to script infrastructure as code and having everything scripted. So if you have to respond to something like that, you can bring it right back up. So this is done. Oh, I didn't do what I did the last time, where I went through and I proved that I didn't have any of that in my account.
It's all good. Totally cheap.
Yeah.
We believe you.
So last time I actually showed you that I didn't have any VPCs. I didn't have a Fargate service up and running. It's too late for that, but this is finished. It's kind of off the screen this way, but there's a little green check mark right here. It says it stood it up nice and good. And then, just like in CloudFormation, so you launch your CloudFormation and you get your CloudFormation resource ARN right here. So I now have a Fargate service up and running in, how long was that? Not even 10 minutes. Ready for me to deploy some containers to. I don't have any containers to deploy it to tonight, but this is what's cool about it to me. Like, I didn't have to do much, and I just launched a Fargate service. I guess the big question going around right now is like, when do you know if you're well, you shouldn't use it because it's not production ready. But when it is, like if this does go GA, like when would you use it? Like, I'd say, if you're a small startup, most small startups only have the bare necessities of people that they need to get whatever they're doing up and running. So, if you're running a JavaScript shop and that's all you have, you really don't have to bring in an infrastructure guy. You have a JavaScript guy who knows JavaScript, maybe needs to read the documentation on the CDK, but he can develop the infrastructure at the same time he's developing the application and get everything up and running at the same time. I'll go this way and then.
Thanks. Quick question: have you messed with or experimented with? Are there constructs for like CloudWatch for snapshots, backups, all the other config and all the stuff around this? It's great to build an environment. There's all those other pieces that sometimes can take.
CloudWatch is in there. CloudWatch Events is in there. I don't know about snapshots.
Just curious how deep you've gone to
I haven't dug deep enough.
Infrastructure around your infrastructure.
I haven't dug deep enough into the EC2 and RDS stuff to look into, or RDS for the snapshots.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine that stuff is in there because you can define snapshots in CloudFormation.
Right.
So hopefully it's in there. Okay. But yeah, you can create CloudWatch Events. All that. CloudTrail, so CloudTrail is in there, so you can create all your CloudTrail stuff.
Okay.
Actually, it would be interesting to see.
Because I think it'd be nice to have all that standardized to tack on to whatever's being built.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, sorry, jumping in line. You had the ECS patterns in there. Are there other patterns too?
I don't know. So the ECS patterns is one of those things. So they're updating it a lot. So when the ECS patterns before like version 0.31 wasn't in there. It was just a part of the ECS service. Mm-hmm. So yeah, they update it pretty frequently, like 2 or 3 times a week. And that's probably one of the big drawbacks. I mean, it's a beta service, right? So it breaks a lot. So every time they roll it out, it breaks something. So
it seems like the patterns would have all that stuff.
Yeah. So ECS is the only place I've seen the patterns. So they pulled some of that out of ECS and made the ECS patterns, and that was in release 0.32, I think. I'd have to look and see if EC2 has that. Yeah. That's where the load balance. I think that's where I create the load balancer. But like today, when I was making sure that this demo ran, yesterday they pushed out version 0.35, and why do I just go past it? So down here right here, so it was before the latest update, it was just memory MIB, but the 0.35 made it memory limit MIB. So I was trying to synthesize, actually it synthesized fine, it created everything fine, but it was failing on when I actually deployed it. So I'm looking at it, I'm like, why is this failing? So, it's one of those things like, They update it frequently, it breaks, you have to go into the documentation and fix it. Go here and then I'll come
Yeah,
back to you,
yeah.
because I know you have a
I'll
question.
give you two then.
Yeah, fire away.
Go ahead.
Okay, so you're on a team of people and your favorite developer goes in here, you've already deployed with CDK, they change a user data script or something like that. I'll give you part of the answer. There's no drift detection on CDK yet, that's an open ticket.
Yeah, there's not.
So eventually, do you like use CloudWatch Drift and like set up an alarm?
I would, in
or-
that case, I mean, if this was GA, if I were the architect, you know, my accounts would have been deployed with config running, so config would catch something like that
Gotcha.
and
Okay.
kick it back. You know, it would notify, one, it would notify the sysadmin team who monitors that, and then two, it would run a Lambda job that would set it back. Yeah, so there's no drift in it, but so let's. What's 4 gigs? What's 4 gigs in? Is it 4096?
4096, yeah.
Sorry, I'm terrible at that. So what I can do is I change my memory limit from 2 gigs to 4 gigs. So if I pop back, actually I gotta look up the. Sorry. Let's look up the. Oh, I know what I can do. I know what I can do. Sorry, I don't know all the commands off the top of my head. There is a, so I changed it. Should be CDK diff. I might be wrong, I don't know. If I run the CDK diff command, it should show me what I just changed.
So it shows the diff in that basically.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so here you see I changed my memory.
Yeah. There's
And
your
then-
drift.
Yeah, so it's not drift detection,
Yeah, so it doesn't.
because
check
if
the
somebody
actual
went in and
account.
changed it,
Yeah.
yeah, it wouldn't show that, like, we have drift,
Okay.
yeah, so,
Gotcha.
but then what I can do is I can actually now,
Deploy it again.
actually I
just
think I have to,
put it
yeah,
back to normal. Yeah.
so I can deploy that change, and it should update my stack.
Okay, so second question is, if this just makes CloudFormation locally, does this work on C2S or no?
That I don't know.
That's the
I
pretty-
doubt it.
Yeah.
I doubt this is configured to run. Yeah, so here he says creating my CloudFormation change. So yeah, I'm going to say
Does
no.
it make CloudFormation locally and then executes CloudFormation, or?
Yeah, so what it does is basically takes your JavaScript or TypeScript or C#, whatever you wrote it in, and then it compiles the CloudFormation for you, or it creates a CloudFormation template for you.
Mhm.
And then it deploys that CloudFormation through a change set. So it's still it uses CloudFormation to deploy it. So just like Terraform, you use HCL, right?
Mhm.
You define your infrastructure in HCL. If you're deploying to AWS, yeah, there it goes. If you're deploying to AWS, it generates that in YAML, and I think it creates a CloudFormation. I've never used Terraform, so I don't know, but I think it creates a CloudFormation change set and deploys it that way, right? Or uses a medium. I don't know how GoFormation or anything like that.
It does the same thing.
Same
It
thing,
transfers
yeah.
it down to a template and
Yeah.
deploys it.
Um,
It doesn't deploy it for you. You have to build that part.
Yeah. I think we had a question here. Nope.
Yes, and
So you're saying that, like, you're working in your terminal here, and it's building a CloudFormation template and then deploying it to CloudFormation, right?
Yeah.
Do those end up in, like, when you upload a CloudFormation template to CloudFormation,
Oh, yeah.
it deploys it to a S3 bucket? Do you still get these templates in that S3 bucket that you can go back and reuse, or?
You know what? You can define it to do that. I think you have to define it to do it, because like these ones, I was actually checking when I was cleaning stuff up, and it wasn't in like when I push something to CloudFormation through a template I've developed, it either puts it in a bucket I've defined it to go to, or it creates it'll create a bucket and it'll drop that CloudFormation in here. I actually noticed today when I was making sure this all worked that it wasn't there, like there wasn't an S3 bucket with it. So I don't know in that case, but I think you can tell it to deploy it to an S3 bucket. So it's, you have that kind of stored repository for it.
Well, I see it's kind of being like, it's a development tool is the way I see it.
Yeah.
Right, so it's like, it's nice that you can deploy it straight from your command line, but you're not gonna deploy to production that way, right? Like, I mean, the output of this really should be the template itself, and then that can be deployed to QA,
Yeah.
staging, then production.
Yeah, you could.
know?
Yeah, you could create your you could tell it to create that CloudFormation artifact that would then be stored in S3, or I guess you could store it in Nexus or something like that if you wanted.
So you
that.
can't just do that, just generate the output only, right?
I mean, you could tell it to deploy to production if you wanted to, but I know. So one of the questions I had from the last presentation I gave was about that stack sets. It was like, does the CDK use stack sets? So there's actually a very active is Gitter Gitter for the GitHub chat tool.
Oh, yeah.
But the AWS Slack channel, there's a CDK room for it, and they have a room on Gitter or Jitter, whichever. I don't know which is the correct one. I'm sorry. Just like GIF or GIF. I'll say both because it could be. So I did ask one of the lead developers on it, and he kind of said, the way, and it actually they've now worked into the documentation that if you're deploying across multiple accounts, you would do that as a stack, right? So you create stacks for each account, each region, but then you would use a pipeline delivery method. So yeah, you would deploy it to your dev account as a part of the pipeline, and then it would just keep getting promoted. So I guess that's a good question: is how would you keep using like the JavaScript in my case and promoting that up, or like the Docker build once,
Right.
run many times? Do you then take that synthesized CloudFormation and push that up as an artifact, from S3?
Right.
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know if anybody's thought about it that hard out. I think.
Have you?
How do you, so can you tear it down just as easily as you?
Yeah.
bring it up?
Yeah, it's CDK destroy is the command that'll bring it all down. But yeah, it's.
Have you seen any discussions about using this with like GitLab or CI tools or anything like that?
Yeah, so for the kind of pipeline
Yeah.
development, one of the actually I think she's from Austin. She's a really good gist up there right now on how to. She's got a pipeline for a code pipeline for basically deploying an EC2 RDS type application for like a blog. So I've seen that for a code pipeline. I've seen people who've done it through Circle CI. I've not seen Jenkins yet, but I know people have talked about getting it to work with Jenkins. But
Okay, I don't want to use Jenkins.
you don't want to use Jenkins. No. I come from Jenkins jobs, so I haven't really used it. But yeah, people are starting to play around with the deployment methods and doing pipeline delivery. People are doing testing. They're doing unit testing. They're doing linting with the linting and unit testing of choice for whatever language they're working in. So it's all kind of getting there. I'll go here and then So.
You mentioned that it's using Well-Architected Framework. Is that well documented? I want to build trust with InfoSec and QA and have them understand that this code here, very abstract, is generating something that meets their requirement.
I mean, I think it's probably at a very base level. Like I showed here, the load balancer it spun up was just on port 80.
Yeah.
So I think some of that is for because it's still in the testing phases and it's still a beta product, right? But it has been referenced to in some of the articles on it. I don't know how hard hard and fast that is.
Yeah.
What I can try and do is I'll try and find some of those articles and get it to the Dan and the Thorn guys here to get it out, or I could just even post it in the meetup chat so you have that. But yeah, I mean that's kind of, I guess, no offense, AWS taking them at their word for saying that they did work with the security folks and the solutions architects to at least make sure it does stuff
But that might
at a
be-
minimum, well-architected
Might be something where
level, right?
config can help to
Yeah.
enforce those rules.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you a question though. Can you like view the source? Like earlier you were talking about like.
It's all on GitHub, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, like if you really wanted to see what they were doing
Yep.
for part
Yeah,
of
you
the
can go to
best
GitHub
practices,
and-
you can actually look at the code and see
Yeah.
what they're doing.
Yeah, it's all on GitHub. You know, you can submit pull requests and look at it, and sweet. So that worked. So I've now upped it up to 4 gigs. But yeah, it's on GitHub. I think it's AWS Labs CDK. They'll take pull requests and everything, and you can look right at it and see exactly what they're doing. I need to make the time to do that. I think.
I have 2 questions. Have you identified any gaps from using this as opposed to what I'll call traditional methods?
What are we calling traditional methods? CloudFormation. I mean, I think the big gap is right now is that there's not much stability to it. So like as they change it in the current phase they're in, like it breaks a lot of stuff. So if you're keeping up with them and doing kind of demo development work in it, like 2 or 3 updates a week, it breaks a lot of stuff. So you kind of, and the documentation's not staying up to date. So I've had to go in and submit pull requests to get their official documentation updated to where it currently is. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of stability to it, just because I think they're trying to figure out what the best way to do everything is. What else? What else?
I have a question. So when you change the memory, did that deploy just that one component, or what do you call that, stack, or the full CloudFormation?
So it did a change set on just the ECS instances. So the EC2 instances that are running my ECS cluster, basically just tore them down, and I would tear them down or just update them. We'd probably tear them down. So we'd tear down the old ones and build new ones with 4 gigs of RAM in this case. What else?
Naive question, because I don't know that much about CloudFormation. Does it tear them down rolling, or does it do it all at once?
It
or?
can, yeah. In this case, it probably was rolling.
Okay.
But like, just like, so in CloudFormation, when you're doing like an auto-scaling group, you can define how you want it to roll out your updates, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah, so you can have like,
So it'll depend on
1 or 2, tell it how many you want it to deploy. Yeah, so I'd say, stability, it's a beta product, so, stability is not. The documentation is, actually, I just said this today, is the documentation is messy. So like if you go to the construct library, and it's a very detailed construct library, but on the left side of the screen where they have all the AWS products that are currently available, it's just a jumble. Like it's like, it goes like Athena to, some like EC to, it's all over the place. Like they haven't organized it very well. Which I would hope gets fixed when this does become a 1.0 release. But that being said, I think it does have a lot of benefits over CloudFormation. Like and maybe I'm picking straws here, but I really like that I can see everything from the command line, because I don't know of anything I can do with CloudFormation in the command line to see the events output. I have to pop back into my web browser and go to the CloudFormation console to see all that happen. I get that right here, and I really appreciate that.
Was it before it happened or after you deployed?
What was that?
The state you say you saw, is it like, if you do like a Terraform plan, that's before you actually do an apply?
Oh, so like doing like a CDK synthesize?
Well, to actually see what you're gonna be building.
Oh, so it can be done before and after. So,
okay. All right.
So yeah, like after I've coded my application, I can run that CDK Synth, and I can see, I'll see everything that's going to happen. In this case, when I ran the CDK diff, so I can run the CDK diff, and here it's telling me everything that's gonna change. I have to run a command to see that. I don't. Do you have to do the same? And do you have to run the? Yeah. Okay. And then of course at the beginning, before I had done anything, I got that security warning that says, "Hey, I'm building IAM resources for you. Can I continue?" I can say yes or no, and it'll do that for me.
So, if you had a mature enterprise, do you see any advantage in trying to bring this in and migrate to this in your existing enterprise, in your existing VPCs?
It's a good question, and I've actually been thinking about that.
And the reason that I'm asking is one of the challenges that we see is maintaining consistency across environments.
Yeah.
And dealing with that through automation, especially with high velocity, and looking for options to get a little bit of stability there.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on. I think it's going to depend on what AWS resources you're talking about. For something like if you're using AWS organizations to create your AWS accounts, I think you're probably going to stick with CloudFormation and doing custom resources, right? Because those hopefully don't change a lot. If you're doing a lot of microservice-based stuff in Lambda or anything like that, I think, will you make the change? I don't know, but if you're just, if you're leaving something and going into the microservice and heavily relying on Lambda and API gateway and stuff like that.
You're already there.
You're already there? Yeah. I think it's going to depend. If you have that stuff, maybe. I think, again, for the small startups, this could be, because CloudFormation, if you're only in AWS, CloudFormation is not that hard to pick up. But, if you're a small startup trying to get out as fast as you can, taking away that, I have to learn CloudFormation and YAML or JSON to define that too, I just have to learn the concepts, but I already know the JavaScript or the TypeScript. Yeah, that's a good question. It'll be interesting to see how that takes off.
For all the documentation that you've read, do you have a good feel for the roadmap? Because pretty much this is pre-beta, so to speak. I mean, you have something that works.
Yeah.
In a sweet spot.
But it breaks a lot.
It breaks a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. So, do they give you a sense as to their progress or any roadmap feel?
Yeah, it's more you kind of have to talk to those guys.
They're not publishing anything.
The last published thing I think they put out was when they initially announced the CDK on the AWS blog, but the lead developer I think is Elad Ben Israel, and he's very active in both the Gitter and the CDK room in the AWS Slack. So those are questions that whenever I have questions, I'll put a comment in for him and say, hey, and he responds pretty quickly. So they're very willing to talk about it. They're very willing to take, like I said, pull requests and such on GitHub and improvements from people. I haven't seen a roadmap. I'll have to look out and see if there is an actual roadmap, like on the, as a part of the README or whatever in GitHub. But they're very willing to listen to everybody who's playing around with it and listen to recommendations and make those changes.
The only reason why I'm asking is because AWS has probably the most products out of all the cloud providers.
Yeah.
But the problem is when you come out with something like this, you're playing catch-up. And I prefer probably to stick with something that is more mainstream and that will have the support.
Yeah, it's interesting because if you look at CloudFormation and what is it CloudFormer that's it's CloudFormation but from the web UI, I think it's CloudFormer. CloudFormation was released in 2010, CloudFormer at the same time, and CloudFormer hasn't gone anywhere. But then you look at a service like Terraform, and Terraform has support for a lot more AWS products than CloudFormation does.
Yeah.
So my personal opinion is I think we will know the cloud, if this goes general availability, I think we'll know the CDK will be a hit is if somebody else tries like Terraform was a response to CloudFormation, but platform agnostic is if somebody tries to do that would be a little more difficult because you're talking many more services, but if somebody tries to do a platform agnostic version of this that kind of has it, that might be a little more difficult, but yeah, I don't know, it'll be interesting. I just enjoy it because for me it was an educational thing and diving into a world I've never really been into. So we'll see.
I have a comment for the why would development teams want to go to this. The thing that interests me most, I've already said, is the ECS patterns. I was just looking that up a little bit, but they have one where you can create a scheduled EC2 task, which actually involves a lot of pieces. It involves like CloudWatch events and like setting up a lambda to trigger the Fargate container. So that's neat that you can just create like a higher level construct and just say you want a scheduled EC2 task and it'll just work.
Yeah.
So I think those higher level constructs will really make people want to use it.
And that's, I think, the great thing about this is you can get as high level or down, you can go down into the weeds if you want. Like if you really want to define all that stuff, they've done a good job making, I think, only the bare minimum required for those. Like I pointed out in Fargate, the only required options were cluster and the container image. That was it. You don't have to define the rest of the stuff. It'll do the rest for you. But they let you get down into the weeds and define that if you want to, if you really need to define that stuff. So it all depends on what your use case is for what you're trying to do.
It reminds me a lot of Java MapReduce meets PySpark. 1,000 lines to 20 lines in the same code.
Yeah, I mean, if I really wanted to get into the weeds, it would grow. Would it grow 687 lines? Probably not. I mean, the corresponding CloudFormation would grow just as much, if not more. So it's it's kind of fun to play with. So no, okay. I just saw a hand go up. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.